Today we're here to talk about avoiding common pitfalls, which come in a few different ways, but we all know that we want to get our customers the right level of service. So avoiding those pitfalls can be key. Your trainer today is myself, Randy Pearden. I'm one of the sales team members up here at Rousseau. So as is common, we've broken up the topic into three areas of pitfall. There's quotations, orders, and communication or policy understandings. First is quotations. So there's lots of places where potential pitfalls can happen, but statistically, the most common pitfall that leads to a client complaint or unhappy customer is, believe it or not, the selection of a correct sizing or part number of an accessory. Now, there is a reason for that. Some products, quite honestly, can be challenging to select the right size due to dimensional logic. Some of these products are dividers or partitions, interior dimensions for a drawer, bins, groove trays, etc. For example, looking at the picture on the left here, which seems to have fairly simplistic dimension of 5-inch or 6-inch, it's not exactly true if you were to caliper it or tape measure it. The reality is that this drawer uses nominal dimensions like most things. So the Rousseau housing, which is a perfect dimension of say 48 inches as an example, we use a nominal dimension of less 4 inches for the drawer. Then there's another 1/2 inch less for the interior of a drawer. So by the time you start measuring a partition or a divider, the dimension won't be exactly 5 or 6. Now with dividers, of course, we have the part number laser engraved, but the customer may just provide a measurement, meaning asking those questions is key. Now, we advise considering keeping a few of those accessories in stock, mostly for internal team members, and of course, the occasional external team person. That's to make it simple to understand why it's different or how it looks. The next thing that comes up very commonly and can lead to that pitfall is changing dimensions. So when the dimensions start moving around. Now, this happens most commonly on an active project. So you're working on commonly a shelving or cabinet project, and the customer or the design or what have you changes as you work through the project. But as it changes, careful attention needs to be on which version everybody's working on. For example, if you communicated the first version to Rousseau and we're working on that, and then 3 or 4 more revisions have happened, and then one part's being requested, we may not know what's happening in between. Now, the impact of that is somehow obvious, but we're stating if the dimensions have shifted, regardless of blame, because blame is not relevant, happy customers are what we want. If the dimensions have shifted, it can lead to an on-site or installation delay issue, which can have lots of implications, lost revenue or profit, obviously, because now it's a second trip, a second visit, etc. And the most expensive and the worst one of all, dissatisfied customers. Next up, and we're going to talk about it more than once, minimum order. There is a minimum order at Rousseau. If you're not sure what yours is, please reach out to your Rousseau rep. But for some products, such as a divider or a partition, meeting a minimum order can be tough. It's a $2 part, if you will, and the minimum is quite a bit higher than that. Now, this can create tension between Rousseau's customer service team, the distribution team member, and potentially the end user as well, if it's not well understood. So it's important that minimum order is a known thing. Now, we at Rousseau have done something to mitigate that. We've added 2 in the United States and 2 in Canada accessory stocking partners. We listed them on eRousseau. It's pretty accessible. That's in order so that if you've got that $2 order, you're not waiting. You can just quickly get that order in and make that customer happy. Next in quotations is the hand sketch. And we say that a lot at Rousseau, the hand sketch. Now, when it comes to hand sketches, we get a lot of descriptions of quotations like I want a cabinet, it needs to be X, Y, Z or ABC. But by far, a hand sketch is the simplest, fastest way to communicate a client's needs, and we'll deal with it from there. The demand could be for something simple even, and a sketch can still provide value if for no other reason that if we see the hand sketch, we can visualize the project. And then maybe we can offer those suggestions or advice to kind of take it to a different way. Now, a comment on hand sketches: clarity before pretty. We can't stress that enough. We all would love to live in a world of a well-detailed three-dimensional drawing that you can fly through with a drone. But the reality is, even if you had that, it's not that clear to quote. It needs to be simple, not overly detailed, just efficient and clear, like the very rudimentary drawing on the right, which has more than enough for us to quote. Now, we encourage all of our partners, review how quotes are requested from your company, because quotes end up creating a lot of delays if something's not understood. The simple rule of thumb is if you look at a quote request you would send in, or somebody in your firm would send in, can you quote it? If you had the time to sit there and get all the part numbers, do you have all the information you need? And if you do, perfect. That's a good hand sketch. Now, it is worth commenting, the biggest delay, and that's where the pitfall is, the biggest delay on receiving quotes is a lack of clarity, which creates those complaints on timelines more often than not. Usually around 5 to 10% of the quote requests Russo gets in a week are complete. Now, moving from quotes to the other area, orders. So there's a question from a lot of our partners: why would an order get delayed? You've done the work, you've sold the job, you sent in the PO, and now it's just held for some reason. Well, it may surprise you to know, but most delays in order processing are not complicated things. They're usually very simple items. Things like color, a key, a door swing, and who the transport carrier is enough to hold it up. Now, again, this is an internal thing on our side, but just to articulate why that matters so much. If you submitted an order, let's say for $10,000 of shelving to Rousseau, there may be an assumption or perception that the block of steel is reserved, your space in production is held. But unfortunately, that's not true. What's more correct is that we need the color and the key code to enter the information into the computer so that production planning can now work with that order. So until we have those seemingly basic details, the order can't be entered in completion, which means it can't go into queue, which leads to those delays. Now, as an extra note on that one specifically, shipping really matters. And us having the carrier at the moment the PO entry is really crucial. Now, above and beyond what we just said of order entry timelines, by not selecting the carrier early, larger issues that are complex to solve can happen. We always want the carrier when we get the purchase order. And it could be changed if it needed to be, but we really do want to have that. And we may even refuse orders from certain players if they don't have that. Now, the impact, that's the question. Why does it impact so much? Well, if we don't have a carrier assigned on the order, what happens is in the condition of, let's say, to be determined, it will ship and then stay at a warehouse. Once it's at the warehouse, we all know the troubles with warehouse to warehouse shipments. That order then could be shipped incorrectly or even lost at the DC, making it just that much more important to have the right information. Next, the design of a purchase order does matter. Document design matters and how that PO is arranged. So it may not commonly be known, but if, for example, you were to submit a purchase order for a toolbox and the toolbox PO had your RA30 housing and then under it, a 5-inch drawer, a 10-inch drawer, a 3-inch drawer, a 3-inch drawer, a 3-inch drawer. On our side, what happens is we're going to enter the PO as it appears like it's supposed to be had. Now, on your side, you may have intended for that to be largest at the bottom, smallest at the top, which would be logical. But unfortunately, the design of a purchase order can create that issue. And as much as we try to call if we see something that appears out of sorts, the reality is we process a lot of orders in a day, and there might be a reason for that to happen. So think about how that PO is arranged, because you can prevent that phone call ever from happening, making it faster. To that end, a point could be to submit a drawing with a purchase order. There's nothing blocking that from happening. If a hand drawing was submitted for something small, or maybe something like a key layout, you've got this project and you want the keys in A, B, and C groups, submitting a drawing means we have a better chance of making it the most accurate possible and catch any potential issues before they become a bigger problem. The simple addition gives us that context that we really need. Now, I'm not promising we're going to fix every error. That's impossible. But more information, better chance of accuracy. Next, when it does come to after the order's been processed and in queue, you've got to read that acknowledgement if you can. When an order moves into production, so the order's been placed for a little bit now, it's now been queued into production, an order acknowledgement is automatically generated and available attached to that order under orders in eRousseau. We really recommend reading these. The reality is this is the last chance to catch an issue before the goods arrive at the customer. Now, I will make the comment, we might be at fault for some errors, same as anybody else, it happens. But at the end of the day, what matters most here is the end user. And the end user is the one that suffers if the goods are inaccurate or incorrect when they are received at site. Next on orders, and perhaps a surprising one, is the email subject line actually does matter quite a bit too. The most common method of modern communication is email, but email has changed a little bit, and these days it's quite often used conversationally. So it can be overlooked to separate subjects when discussing multiple items. So when you're submitting an order, if the project was complex, there's a lot of revisions or unattached projects were discussed, it can become harder to find the correct information. So consider having that subject line specific to the project being discussed. Now, last on orders, sometimes things are just not that clear, right? That's a reality we all live in. We're in an area of gray. So when in doubt, we want to make it clear. Our team, the entire team, is here to support you. Customer service reps, the project managers, sales reps, managers, we're all here to give you the best chance of giving your client amazing service. If for any reason you're unsure that information is complete, you need a bit of training, or even if you just need help articulating what you're trying to get, reach out to your Rousseau representative. We're here to help. Everyone's main goal, like I said, it's that great service end to finish. Last but not least, a quick bit on communication and policy. So first up is communication. Now, communication in the 21st century is obviously a myriad of different options, but at Rousseau, the team usually communicates with email, telephone, Teams, Zoom, FaceTime, video calling, online chat through the portals, and more. Myself, I use WhatsApp quite often. So consider using alternative formats of communication if something's complex. So if you're working on a project, maybe set a Teams meeting with the project manager or with your sales rep to kind of go over it and make sure that the demand is going to be requested exactly as you want it, which can save time, prevent the pitfall of delay, and really get the right thing for the right purpose. Now, policy stuff. I said we'd circle back to policy, and here we are. The first one up is minimum order. So every company who has a contractual arrangement with Rousseau, so distribution, you have a minimum order value required for a PO. The most common minimum order in the market is $100 net. But again, that does present a challenge if ordering one divider. So the policy does need to be understood, and it's best to know who those stocking players are. Now, there is one, we'll call it exception or common exception to this policy, and that's keys and locks. Keys and locks may be waived from a minimum order under certain conditions. The reality is that we can't get an accessory stocking partner to do that because keys need to be cut. Next on the policy side is the return policy, which is sometimes a difficult conversation. The reality is at Rousseau, there is nowhere to store things. We don't have a warehouse for this. And there's no good arrangement for receiving goods back because it's so rare, which often results in anything we receive being thrown out, unfortunately. And that's why there's such a high restocking fee. Now, the reality is, I call it the Amazon day and age, it's hard for customers to understand because they're used to just return it, it's done. It just doesn't work for our type of business, and I'm sure you're all in the same boat. So communicating this policy is important to set the correct expectation. Now, of course, if there is a return that has to be had, it's fine. Just make sure that there's a proper RMA issued by Rousseau prior to shipping those products back. Next is the warranty policy. So this is a rarely used policy in Rousseau's world, but it does happen. So it's separate from the return policy, and we really handle it in a one-by-one case basis. Multiple types of information are required for warranty. So to make the warranty as smooth, as quick as possible, prevent the pitfall of delay, in the very first email, the best practice is pictures, the purchase order number, and a clear description of the event, so what's wrong, and the impact of that event, what it creates. For example, if the problem was a bent work surface, but the impact was nothing can now be installed, we would really like both sides of that, because that helps us do better and respond effectively. Next is freight policy. One of the most common frustrations we hear, and I'm sure everybody hears it every week, is there's a BOL sign clear and there was damage, leaving receivers and distribution at a complete standstill, trying to figure out who's at fault and what can be done with it. But by setting clear expectations to the customer, hopefully it's a simpler conversation. Now in the Rousseau Academy, there's a well-documented policy for all distributors, one in US and one in Canada. That's why I didn't bring it up here, because there's two depending which country. But please go to that, know the policy, breathe the policy, and tell the consumers that so that the customers have the correct expectation. Now, one common misnomer that I'd like to dispel is by putting possible or maybe concealed damage on a BOL, that's not indicative of proof and it's not claimable. That's a rumor that went around for a long time. If you're going to write damage on a BOL, it really needs to be infinitive and say damage in that case. With that, that's it. I'll go to questions in a second, but this completes today's recorded session.